Welcome to the Golf Improvement Podcast, episode 149.
Welcome to the podcast for golf lovers and enthusiasts who are looking to take their games to new heights. Dedicated to custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice to improve your golf game. This is the Golf Improvement Podcast with your host, Tony Wright.
Hello, this is Tony Wright from Game Improvement Golf in Oak Ridge, Tennessee with the Golf Improvement Podcast, dedicated to sharing useful information on true custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice techniques. I create exceptional golf clubs. You shoot lower scores. In these crazy and scary times, it's kind of fun to bring you a topic that I don't think we've really talked about in the past. And right before I was about to start recording this, I thought timing is everything, and this is the right time. The topic is what really matters in putter weighting for putting performance. You'll hear a lot of the answers in this interview with good friend Bruce Rearick from Burnt Edges Consulting in Indianapolis, Indiana. You're going to know a lot more about what's important in putter weighting than you probably ever knew in the past. I'm sure Bruce and I could have talked for at least 2 hours on this topic, so enjoy this fascinating interview with putter fitting guru Bruce Rearick.
www.gameimprovementgolf.com.
Hello, this is Tony Wright with episode 149 of the Golf Improvement Podcast. And I want to thank Bruce Rearick from Burnt Edges Consulting in, near Indianapolis for being back with me today to talk about a topic I think, I would characterize it as deep and interesting and not something that many people talk about much. The influence of putter weighting on putting performance. So, Bruce, welcome back. And first, I hope you and your family and your friends and those folks around you are just as safe as possible.
Thank you, and the same to you, Tony, and everybody that's listening. It's not a fun time, but we'll come out of it. So,
yeah. Well,
we're supposed to do, right?
That's right. It's what we got. We're going to do our best. Yeah. So, well, we haven't talked in a fairly long time. Bring my listeners up to date, I think it was like 9 months ago maybe, on some of the most important things you've been doing and learning about in the past year or so.
Well, I can't believe it's 9 months, for one thing.
Yeah.
But basically what I've been doing is over the winter and then in this time where I'm not doing much teaching right now, at least not face-to-face, I've gone back and I've redone my online program. Still working on it, adding the new material the new things that we've learned, updating based on putter design and how that's influenced how we think and what we're seeing. And I've changed technologies again. And so I'm looking to see how that the data provided by the new technology, I'm with Capto now.
Yeah.
And looking to see how the data that I get from Capto compares to the data that I got with the other manufacturers, and it's just a matter of learning. It's like learning a new language. It's not that the data really changed. It's just how you interpret it. So much of what we base our information on is calculated stuff, and so how a technology takes the data that it measures and calculates to the conclusions. For me, I always have to go back in and sort through and say, how does this apply to my model, which was an engineering-based model? It was based on actual measurements, engineered measurements, as opposed to calculated data from technology. So that's been a lot of fun. I get pretty deep in the weeds on this stuff, which that's how I keep from getting bored with it. But it's been pretty fun and interpreting. How Capto looks at things and how I look at things and where's the common ground and what can I learn from the calculations and, and maybe what they can learn from the engineering part. I don't know if, for those that are listening that know my stuff, is our original findings were based on a 10-inch backswing and what direction that plane was tilted. So, and then there's different ways to define the plane, and how people move, and we've clarified some of that. We're adding that in there, not to go too deep, but it's gonna end up being fun, and when I'm not around anymore, there'll be this document laying around for some young golf pro somewhere to take off with and run with. So
yeah, that's cool stuff. Yeah.
Having fun.
Well, today we're going to talk a little bit about putter weighting and why it's important. And again, as I said, very few people talk much about this. Some introductory words may be about the importance of putter weighting, why it matters for many golfers.
Well, I think that for us, it's been the real eye opener. As you know, when I started, all putters basically weighed the same, and so you'd have a 319 gram head on a shaft that weighed 120 grams, and you'd have a grip that weighed 60 grams, and that all added up to 500 or 490 or whatever it was, and that's what we used. And the only variation would ever be guys that would put lead tape on a putter, or they would put sand down the shaft, or sugar, whatever.
I never heard of sugar. That's interesting. Yeah, right.
Al Finsterwald put sugar down the shaft of a zebra putter. First time I ever saw anybody do it, and he just filled it up. And I was fascinated, and asking him what did that do? Well, it just needed some more weight. So now, 25 years later, I can explain to him why he did it, that's the fun part. But I will tell you that the biggest thing is that it matters. It's, as we've studied weight, we've really changed how we look, the timeline that we look at things. We've moved putter balance, weight balance, and total weight to probably the third most important factor that we look at. And it used to be just one of many at the end. But now it's overcome. We think that weight has more influence than toe hang. I'm pretty sure of that now. And I always say that going, it's just me studying it, right? So to talk in absolutes is pretty silly. But for me, it certainly is more influential than toe hang. And obviously has an influence on toe hang. So, and then where the weight is on the putter is the next level of this, and really important. And you and I, and thank you publicly for the work that you did and shared with me, because it was eye-opening for me. And I was able to take some of that, and still not sure what I'm looking at, but I'm getting closer and getting ready to. I think the goal, and maybe it's foolish to say, but this idea of an MOI rating for a putter and how it would relate to a player, and the numbers that we can measure from a player standpoint, again, using a baseline. Let's say we use a 10-inch baseline. So a 10-inch backswing, how fast does that putter move? How long does it take to get back to the ball? Those kind of things. I can influence that with weight. And so if that's the case, then I can also reverse engineer it and say, well, this direction influences this direction, if that makes sense. And so if I add more weight, I get slower. If I add less weight, I'm lighter. So, or I'm faster. So that's kind of where it all starts. And so how deep can I go with that? Probably more than I expected, which would in the real world is a hell of a lot, because
you weren't much into that at the start. When we sort of talked about this a little bit.
It was what was bugging me. And I would hear guys come on your program and talk about they didn't see the influence that I did in a certain putter or a certain style of putter. They saw different things. And I started to ask myself, why? Why are they seeing something that I'm not? And I think I figured it out, that it was that the variables in weight, a lot of tests were done whether a putter mattered or not without any consideration to weight or weight distribution. And so how you react to that weight is, and we'll get into it, but I'll give you one analogy that I've got that I use now to try and convince people on a basic level why weight's important. So, Tony, let's say you got your little red wagon from when you were a kid, okay?
Yeah.
And you load bricks in that wagon, and you start loading bricks, and you're loading bricks, and you're loading bricks. And I give you a task that says, Tony, I need you to roll this wagon from point A to point B. Then I need you to stop, turn the wagon around, and roll it from point B back to point A, but it needs to be moving at a certain speed when you get there. Okay?
That's the hooker.
Well, does that make sense?
Yeah, right.
All right, so the heavier that wagon gets, the more difficult the task becomes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then the lighter it gets, the easier it is to stop it, but I might get to point B or I want to get back to point A too quickly.
Or you can't kind of control it, maybe, right?
Exactly. The heavier I make that wagon, the harder it is for me to control when it starts and stops. And this analogy came from, I'll share it just so people can get a laugh at my expense. I was watching a TV program, the old West Wing program, and they were talking about it was a tanker crashed. And the person in the show said, do you know how long it takes for a tanker to stop once you reverse the engines? And the guy on West Wing said no. And he said maybe a couple football fields. No, it takes 6 miles to stop a tanker when you want to stop. And immediately, the geek that I am, that started to apply to putters. How fast are you moving into your backswing, and then how fast can you come out of that backswing? And inertia starts to play a role.
Yeah.
So that was the thing about, all right, you better start looking at weight because you probably missed it. And you took it for granted because everything weighed the same. And then, like you mentioned to me the other day, the idea of a heavier head, 400 grams, or what happens. Well, now we know what happens. And so we can make better recommendations on weight to players just based on these trends that we know that are, basically, just engineering. Just something has to stop. How are you going to stop it?
Yeah.
And how are you going to and think of yourself as a big engine as opposed to a human being that can do anything. Because that's what clouds the picture, is that if I go into it with the assumption that a human being can do anything, that is entirely true. The problem is, can they do it consistently, and can they predict what they're going to do when they do it? And so while we measure these good players and we see what they do, and we assume that anybody can do it. No, that's just what they can do. And so you can't assume that you can do, like I can't assume that I can do what you can do.
Yeah.
Nor can you reverse. So we've got to look at it from terms of what do these different components of the club, what do they influence, and then how does that influence what you do? Like we know from old days in fitting clubs that the softer the shaft, the slower the player will swing over time, because he'll self-fit, right?
Yeah.
He'll take that really whippy shaft and he'll learn how to swing it because he's looking for results. And when he gets a good result, he's timed the shaft to what his swing, and so he just reverse engineers the fit and he fits himself to the club. Well, the problem with that model was it takes too damn long and it's too expensive, right? How many sets of clubs am I going to try before I find the right one? And so that's what's going on. That's still the way it goes with putters. Even with all the information that's out there, people are still self-fitting themselves and using different parameters that maybe don't really apply. Anyway, that's the long answer.
Well, we've already gotten pretty deep, so there you go.
Yeah,
that's fine.
You knew it was gonna, right?
Yeah.
You knew it was gonna.
Yeah. Well, when I think about putter weighting, I typically think of total putter weight and putter swing weight. And as you said, I go back and forth about MOI. I still don't know which way to fit on that. But
right.
You said something. I've seen some of your notes. You used a term from back in my old engineering days, momentum, and it just makes it's very interesting application of that to getting putter weighting right. So talk a little bit about that.
I think all right. So let's create some definitions, okay? Just so we're apples to apples for this morning. So for the average player, if you take the putter back 10 inches you're going to get about 2.5 to 3 mile an hour of club head speed, and you're going to roll a ball on a 10 stimp flat surface. You're probably going to roll the ball somewhere between 7 and 10 feet. Okay.
Yeah.
So if we look at that, and we look at a player, and we say, all right, on a 10-inch stroke, how long does it take you to make that stroke? All right. Is it more than 1 second? Is it less than 1 second? I've just stuck with the old Christian Marquardt 1 second rule, just because it's a great place to start. Right.
Right.
And most people fall in that 9.95 to 1.1 range. So you look at that and you say, well, what can influence that? All right. Well, the biggest influence is total weight of the putter. That how much that putter weighs will influence how fast I'm moving, how easily I can stop at 10 inches, and how easily I can get started again, going back to my wagon analogy. And what we're seeing what Capto shows me that I've never been able to really see before is what happens to the putter at the transition points. So like a real heavy, let's take the example of the old school tank, right? Or the really heavy stuff, the 400 gram, 150 counterweight thing weighs 700 grams. What we see with those players is difficulty getting the putter started, difficulty in controlling the stroke length, and difficulty in transition. Now, Odyssey figured it out by saying, hey, these things that are too heavy, if we make them lighter, it's easier to control stroke length. No doubt. We knew that would happen, right? And so the total weight, if you think about total weight, think about what's the weight that I can handle that allows me to control the putter, just like you just said. So I have control over the start. I don't jerk it away going back. I don't create a new angle because the head moves slower than my hands or my hands move slower than the head. Can I come to a stop without extra effort at the end of the stroke? Can I control the momentum of the stroke so I can control the stop point? Can I then get the putter started again without too much interaction and too much effect on the putter? And then can I swing it through the ball at the speed that I'm looking for? Because the one thing that we don't talk about that is putter head speed and ball speed. That if you're going to control the distance that you're going to roll the ball, you're going to control three things. You're going to control how fast that putter was moving, the angle the ball launches away from the putter, and I'm missing my third. I just thought myself out of it. Anyway, you're going to control those three things, right? You're going to have to control how the ball launches, how fast the ball comes off the putter.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So we know different inserts, the ball comes off faster than others. We know that. We know different golf balls. Now, not as much as it used to, but I guess I'll pick on Nike but Nike made a golf ball years ago that just didn't roll as far as everybody else's golf ball. And they didn't believe me when we told them, and finally we had a group of higher level execs come in and I showed them. And I said, this thing's a foot short on a 10-foot putt. And then they all kind of looked at each other, and I thought, you know what? They got that feedback from the players, and they didn't want to admit it.
Huh.
But so that's the total weight. So think of total weight in terms of timing. When we talk about timing, how fast does it go back, and what's that ratio of timing? How long does it take you to make that stroke? For me, that's the important one. I use that 1 second parameter, and if you're slower than 1 second, you probably use a heavier putter. If you're faster than 1 second, you probably use a lighter putter. You can use, we pick on Brant Snedeker all the time because Brant's got that unique stroke that's quick, doesn't take much time. Putting a heavy putter in Brant's hands, that's not going to work, right?
Yeah.
I can't go and stop and go that quick with a putter that's too heavy. And so if you look at that Rossi that he uses, that's not a heavy head by any means. It's not a heavy putter by any means.
Probably somewhere around 500 grams or maybe even less, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Right.
I think probably in that 525 to 500 range, being closer to 500. And so then there's probably right now there's people that we're talking to that have, I wanted to try that pop stroke, but my putter head weighs 370 grams in the head, and I can't make it work.
I got a guy had, the non-vari that has a head that can't vary the weight, and I know the head is at least 350, 360, and that's the stroke he wants. Can't do it.
Yeah. And what happens? And then what happens is that they think. So I've had guys that have come back to me and said, "Bruce, your stuff doesn't work." And I say, "Why?" And he says, "Well, I did this and I did this and I didn't get the same result." And I said, "No, all you did, like you add weight to the putter to slow down your stroke. You just added weight to the putter. You didn't slow down your stroke. Now the stroke, that your timing becomes more difficult because you went heavier. You didn't take A and apply it to B. You just took A, and so you run into more trouble. So those are the guys that always want to call me and tell me I'm wrong. so I've developed a bunch of answers to try and avoid the fact of admitting that maybe I am. Yeah. So anyway, so that's the one thing. Then the second thing that you've got to consider is how is the weight balanced across the putter. Now this gets into counterweighting and heavier grip. The one thing that we remember back in the day, all the grips were 60 grams, right? Pingman grip, rubber grip, all were right around 60 grams. Or they were cord oversized and they weighed 90. There wasn't much in between. Now you can if you decide that you need a gram that weighs 88 grams or 60 grams or whatever it is, you can go find one. And you can find the grip that weighs what you need. So what we found there is that the head weight, then, that's an influence over how. The biggest thing about head weight is not only does it apply to rotation, but even more so what I'm finding is it applies to shaft angle at impact and how the ball launches.
Okay.
So let's take an example of a guy that has a 400-gram head on. Well, let me use this example, and I won't use names because I didn't ask her if I could do it. But I know a player that I've worked with indirectly for a year or so that went to major manufacturer and had her putter fit. And when they asked her about her weight preference, she said heavy. I like heavier putters. So instead of looking at the entire putter and the weight of the entire putter, they loaded up the head with weight. Okay? So now from a swing weight standpoint at 34 inches, it's crazy heavy, right? It's
F or something like that, right?
Whatever it is,
Yeah.
So what did we find with this player? So what we found with the player when we measured her stroke was the tendency to de-loft the putter in transition. And what I mean by that is when I get to the end of my back, well, first of all, her hands would get ahead of the putter going back. So if you can imagine your hands moving faster than the putter, you're dragging the putter going back. Then when you get into transition, the hands keep moving fast, and you go from an ad-loft position at transition to a de-loft position in transition. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if you think of a spokes on a wheel, and you think of the hub, and you think of that spoke, that hub's moving all the way through the stroke. Okay? Capto calls it the kernel, a putt kernel or shaft kernel, but it's just basically there's a point of rotation that you're rotating around when you're swinging a putter, and it moves a little bit, and some move more than others, and that's all. There's no bad to it. It's just something to watch. And what she got was this lean into it. She de-locked it, so she created lag.
Well, she couldn't let the putter come back. The putter it was moving back so fast that she couldn't get it to come back. Right?
Exactly. So she never gets caught up. So she comes into the ball with a 3-degree loft putter. She comes into the ball at 0 or negative loft, driving the ball into the ground. Even though she's hitting up on it, you got to remember that the force vector is the loft. And even if you hit up on it with negative loft, you still drive the ball down. Okay? You still drive the ball into the turf early. And so that's the greatest point of interference when you hit a putt is the ground, when the ground hits the ball and how it interacts. So if you squeeze the ball into the turf, it's going to jump on you way more than it will if you launch it at the 1 or 2 degrees or some sort of launch. And so by her de-lofting it, she started to get this. The other thing that happened on a lesser scale is that she couldn't rotate back to square. And so she started leaving them short right. And that lean was caused by the head weight of the putter. And so now her thinking it's a mechanical problem throws her stroke all out of whack where she tries to change how the putter launches. So she's trying to play catch up with that heavy head.
It sounds like, there's a lot of that Y word that can come into effect for people.
Right.
In this, right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And
wow.
And we disregard, and most instructors, and I'm sorry, I don't try to lump anybody into a group, but if I'm an instructor and I'm teaching body mechanics, then I'm not gonna let the putter take credit for the problem, because I need to sell the lesson. And I apologize for speaking that frankly, but that's the truth. And so you've got to look at everything. You've got to look at why, just like you said, why. And then the answer is the answer. And your knowledge is I don't mean to sound preachy, but your knowledge of that is the benefit, right? And then what you're trying to teach them from a mechanical standpoint now starts to make some sense because the tool works.
Yeah.
So that's the influence of the heavy head. Now on the other side, the what we saw were we see a lot of guys counterweighting, because you can now, right? You can go buy a grip and you can counterweighting a conventional weight head. And what we see there is the exact opposite, where the head moves way faster than the hands, and you end up most of the time you end up in a situation where the head has outraced the hands to the ball, and you've added loft to impact, and you're sending it too high. And so then it bounces, and then you get that irregular looking roll. So those guys end up starting to forward press the counterweighted putter, okay, to counter that add loft, so they forward press, and what you end up with is a 3-degree shaft lean at the start to a 0-degree shaft lean at impact. Well, that variable, it makes it almost impossible for you to judge how far you're going to hit any particular putt.
Yeah.
Because a 1-degree launch is different than a 2-degree launch, is different than a 3-degree launch from a ball speed standpoint. And the TrackMan guys call it ball speed at true roll. And that's a critical number. And the more we have the ability to measure that number, the more you're going to hear guys talking about that, because that's the number that decides how far that ball rolls. And so the launch height is what impacts that number. Yeah. And when it happens. Everybody worried about when it happens. Not so much when it happens as how much it is when it gets there. That's what I think is more important. And so, but because the limitations on what we could measure, it's a hard discussion to have, right?
Yeah.
But that's really what you're looking for. How fast is the ball rolling when it starts rolling, and I've got to go 20 feet uphill, downhill, whatever I'm doing.
So now, are you ultimately going to are you going to create another set of putters that, for example, or maybe you've done this already, that vary, like 500 grams to 600 grams total weight, and that's how you start testing with people?
Yeah.
I mean, that's one way to do it, right? Of course, then you got length involved and things like that.
Yeah, what I did was I took, if anybody's ever seen Twitter or Facebook with me, they'll see a picture of 9 test putters that we built.
Right.
And the nice thing about those is they were engineered to such a level that I can completely control the weight. Now the problem is they're a little heavy, so I'm getting more information about what happens when it's too heavy than information about when it's too light.
Okay.
But we'll get that figured out. Nothing at a grinding wheel and.
The right material and stuff like that.
I get it right. Yeah, but it's all playing out. Basically, what I'm saying is that I can't tell anybody exactly right now. I can if I've got you in front of me. We can get it down with some time. We can understand. But lead tape comes into a play. I can tell you that.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, it's the overkill. We have a tendency to go too far every time we come up with a new idea, right? And so in golf, and so that heavier isn't necessarily, that I found a weight that works. Heavier won't necessarily be better, nor will lighter. There's a number, and I think it goes back to, I'm giving it up, but it doesn't matter anymore. It goes back to the time. So from your putt lab that you can measure how long it takes a stroke to happen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that time, that length of the stroke compared to the time to impact are the numbers that will help us decide how much a putter should weigh. And then how I deliver the blow will tell me how to distribute that weight. Okay, so it goes back to location of center of gravity. So one of the things that threw me for a loop was when we started making the putter I always wanted, which was the high MOI head in a low MOI setting, which is a heel shafted putter.
Yeah.
So that reinvented the wheel a little bit. And what the manufacturers are saying is that, well, this does this and this does that. It doesn't really. What it does is it allows us to look at where the weight on the head, how that influences the stroke. And what they're finding is that even though it has some toe hang, I can slow that putter down by moving the weight away from the face. So that what they're saying is that, but that doesn't apply to all putters with toe hang. It only applies to mallets to that specific point, right? So they lump everything in effect. They say, oh, anything with toe hang doesn't rotate as fast. That's not true. That's not true. And the other thing, for my own peace of mind, I'd like to say this, is they've totally misjudged how you determine what a putter does because they measure them all at the same angle. So let's take a heel shafted putter, okay? Now, at 74 degrees, that putter is going to influence you to go heel first, okay? It's going to swing heel first.
74-degree lie, you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
An upright line on a heel shafted putter, it's going to want to stay square to square. And so that explains to guys like Arnold and back in the day, Lauren Roberts, the guys that used full toe hang putters with very limited rotation, they used that toe hang to develop a feel for the stroke because they were heel sensitive. Okay? Now, start to bend that flatter. So the flatter you bend that heel shafted putter, the more it wants to the faster the toe wants to rotate.
Right.
Okay? The more influence the toe has. So all we're saying is that putters will do what the player does. They'll enhance, but you've got to look at more than just saying it's full toe hang or face balanced or whatever it is. And that's why in my original online program, I don't have any conversation about toe hang. I don't even talk about it. I'm saying, okay, if you're going to get into the weeds, you've got to look at variable factors and not just one. You can't just say this is a full toe hang putter and call it a day because they're all different depending on how you build them and where the center of gravity is located. And so anyway, that weight, how heavy that head is, has got to be. So you don't see too many guys. You don't see too many high rotation guys with 400-gram heads.
Yeah. They can't make it rotate.
Yeah, and then there's the player like Tiger Woods who has a delayed rotation. All right. So Tiger rotates it. Let's say Tiger rotates it on a 10-inch backswing. He'll rotate it 8 degrees. Sorry. So he's got 8 degrees of rotation in his backswing. Well, he doesn't cover the 8 degrees to the ball in one smooth move. He maintains that 8 degrees for the first quarter of the forward swing and releases it late. So he has a high rate of rotation at the ball, but might have the same rotation as me, but my rate of rotation might be half of his because I don't have that lag.
Yeah.
I start the putter coming forward equally coming off the transition where Tiger pulls the heel a little bit and rotates the toe fast at the end. So you've got to take that into consideration. Is that what kind of player you are? And those players are typically right-hand dominant, and so it all kind of falls into place. It's just that you can't look at one and call it a day. I guess that's the best way to do it. And so I've been fooling around, and my putter was the easiest one to do. So I have
that was going to be the next thing I wanted to do is just let you talk through how you found out what worked for your putter.
All right, so you can see it, that's pictured on my Facebook page. I have a putter that was made by Kerry Lugosi from Australia. It's a heel-shafted putter where the weight is redistributed so the center of gravity is right in the middle of the blade, okay? And it's a 340-gram head. I've got an 88-gram round grip on the end. The shaft that I have in it weighs 117 grams. It's a head speed at 37 inches. If anybody.
Oh yeah.
So I got a old 1950s head speed shaft on an 88 gram grip, 340 gram head, 37 inches long. Its swing weights, I don't even know what its swing weights, but it balances where I need it to balance. And so the counterweighting, what the counterweighting does in a putter, when you start moving the weight, is all it does is it changes the balance point of the shaft or where the putter bounces on the shaft, right? So the reason that, going back to we're going to talk about swing weights, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that why swing weight doesn't work is because it's based on a fixed fulcrum. It's based from how it compares to 12 inches, or you know better.
14, I think it is. Yeah.
14, right? I think it used to be 2. Now there's just the 1. So 14 inches. Well, that works great when you're comparing apples to apples. So you're progressive lengths and you're trying to find and you're measuring. But when you've got variable length putters on a one-off situation, swing weights can be deceiving. It's all we had for years. I figured out a different way to look at it, and that's been beneficial for me. But it's not a swing weight based, because mine, let's say I think mine's probably E4 if I was going to weigh it.
I'll bet I would expect it may even be higher than that, but anyhow.
Right, at 37 inches,
yeah.
Right? Doesn't swing that way. Doesn't feel that way at all because of the 90 gram grip and because of the lighter than average weight of the shaft. Everybody picks it up and they go, and they swing it and they go, well, Bruce, this swings easy. It's so mine at 37 inches, mine is relatively light on the head side. Okay?
Yeah.
So I counterweighted, but I counterweighted just with the weight of the grip. I didn't put any extra weight. I didn't take it too far. And so we're figuring out where that balance point is for different strokes. And, eventually I'll share with you. Right now I'm kind of holding on to it because I'm not sure, but I've got a technique that's real simple. Somebody's going to figure it out that tells me how to look at it. You already know it. You just haven't put the same words to it.
Aha. Okay.
Okay. And so I'll leave that out there. I'll see what kind of response we get.
Yeah.
But basically you can determine how that putter balances and match that to a player's stroke.
Now, if you had another 37-inch, 545 gram putter that wasn't, I'm diving in deep here too, I guess, 545 gram putter, but it wasn't balanced the way correctly for you, what's typically the difference you would see in that for you? It
would go back to what we just talked about grip heavy or head heavy.
Yeah. It's
going to fall in a different spot. And so like typically, let's say I went to a lighter grip, okay? Let's say I put just a conventional grip on there that was 70 grams. I would start to see that I launched the ball at about 1.5 degrees.
Yeah.
With a 3-degree putter. I would start to see that launch number go down, where I would launch it lower, and I would get to the ground. And I don't want to get to the ground quicker than that. I need some room for air, right?
Yeah.
So my hope is that I would. That's what I found. And what Capto tells me, and again, Capto's been great. Capto tells me where I'm at right at that impact, right? And it allows me to say, okay, that was we launched that one at 0.5. We launched this one at 1.5, and then ask the player what did you do different? And if they tell me I didn't do anything different, then I know it's the putter. And so I can start to throw the lead tape on there.
Yeah.
I've got a player here. I got a player here in Indiana that's probably got 30 grams of lead tape on the shaft of his putter, and he's a good player. He's a senior PGA qualifier, and he's a real good player. And he did it himself. He just started adding tape till it started to feel good, and he was rolling it out. And basically, the parameters were for him. The fit is make a 10-inch stroke. How far does the ball roll? No target, no hole, no nothing. Just make a 10-inch stroke. How far does the ball roll? Are you consistent? No. All right, then let's start moving some weight around till we get at that point. Move the weight around, and then all of a sudden, he started to get it dialed in. Now, I hope that nobody thinks this is new, right? It's not. It's not. It's just I'm describing it differently. There's been fitters all forever that have counterweighted and fit to distance using counterweights. What I'm saying is that it was too big and too much, and that a little weight goes a long ways, and you don't need a 50-gram counterweight. And so what happened, Tony, was that we started to use total weight as a way to mask the errors in our stroke. So if I make one at 700 grams, it swings me. I don't swing it. And so what I might do wrong in my stroke kind of goes away because what I might see that's wrong in my stroke kind of goes away because I've made it so heavy
You can't stroke it at all, and it looks like it's better.
Yeah, but over time, I think you can vouch for this, over time it starts to influence my stroke in a certain way that might be negative. And because I start to go back to my natural tendencies or try and get to what feels right in my stroke, and that weight is an interference, and then I fight harder to get my way. And it's like two little kids fighting. Who's going to get their way, the putter or you? Well, you'll get your way, but it might be to your detriment. So that's why I want to try and figure out a way to just use the data to say, this is the range that we think you'd be in that you wouldn't react to.
Yeah.
And you'll be able to swing it. And it plays out. I've had enough. The problem is, as always for me, is that I can't just off the rack it. I can't fit you in a putter off the rack or within the parameters of what the OEMs have set that really lets me do this.
Yeah.
But for the guys that want to put the time in and want to figure it out, yeah, I can do it. So the more variables, the weights that they can make, the better, and like Mizuno right now, and I don't no reason to plug Mizuno. I haven't had a relationship with them for 7 or 8 years, but they came out with a weighting system so that when you buy a putter, you get 3 sets of weights. Well, that's a start. That and some lead tape. That's a start, and you can start to build this putter that swings with you instead of against you.
Well, and as you know, Scotty's had weights, but nobody ever uses them, right?
Well, yeah,
and
Scotty
things
made
like
it
that.
almost possible to do it, right? And so and it's unfortunate because I've always felt, and this is where nobody wants to hire me, right? that I think that the consumer, if you build a putter for a consumer that works for him and helps him, he'll come back and buy another putter from you just because that's the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
What's new and what can I try new but what they do is they build one just to entice you to buy it, and then you find out it doesn't work for you, and you say, well, it must have been because it was X company. Well, that's not fair to either one. That's not why it didn't work. And so the trick is to make more options available. And it'll come. They didn't believe it with drivers for a long time either, right?
Yeah.
And so it'll come when it becomes viable for them to make some money at it. They'll figure out a way to do it, and they'll do it. But it's lead tape's going to make a comeback as far as I'm concerned.
I have big rolls of lead tape. I'm going to share a connection with somebody. That I don't know if it's gets to something that you're doing, but right. I don't know if you ever saw this stuff about MBI. It's sort of a step past moment of inertia stuff, but anyhow, we'll go to that sometime. I'm going to share a connection with somebody that uses that a lot, and maybe he'll get some other things that. But the whole issue of balance. I mean, if you really, we've talked for 40 minutes, so we're not going to talk too much more today, okay? Because it's usually about the right time. But the issue of balance and the issue of momentum, right? To me, I mean, not the issue, but getting the right balance, creating the right momentum, so you and the putter are somehow in sync. I mean, that sort of summarizes it, doesn't it?
Exactly. And I can tell you that the range so far has been 490 grams to 560 grams.
Okay.
And so anything heavier than 560 is kind of a red flag for me right now. And I know I shared that with you in an email, and I think that surprised you a little bit.
Yeah.
But I'd like to keep it right now. But I think it's because of the putters. It's been around 530 to 545 has been kind of the sweet spot. And that the guys that the Brad Faxons of the world and the Tiger Woods of the world have been on the lower 500s, and the big muscle strokes. The guys that are shoulder or core rotators,
right?
They'll go up here because it just depends on how much you use your hands, right? What we found is the more you use your hands, probably the lighter the better. And the more you use your core and try and rotate your core in order to be able to judge how much that disconnect between your body and the club head, in order to judge how big your turn is, it's easier to do that if it's heavier. So that's a quick way to start to think about it. So
there's nothing bad about using your hands if that's you, right?
And what's fun is that, I've never gone away from, I've always had you're either going to rotate around your core, you're going to rotate around your shoulders, or you're going to swing your arms and your hands, right? Those have been the three ways. I haven't moved from that.
Yeah.
What I love is that I'm hearing more and more of the guys that are, my colleagues start talking about swinging their arms and their hands. 5, 6 years ago, 8 years ago, we were all talking about, perfect posture and rotating, big muscle rotation. Now we're seeing, and I think it's because the guys that putt well are the ones that use their hands the best. And so we're starting to see that. And so we go back the other way. I love it. I'm not doing anything different. I'm just saying that for me, there was no reason to change because all three of them worked, right?
Yeah.
I can give you a great example of a core rotator. I can give you a great example of a guy that rotates along the top of his shoulder blades and rotates around that, swings his arms and his shoulders in sync from the top of his shoulders. I can show you the guy that rotates, stays connected and rotates around his sternum or his rib cage. And I can show you the guy that just swings his left or his right arm underneath his shoulders and doesn't really even use his shoulders. And so that's never changed. Those three were always going to work. It's just that everybody's got this search thinking there's a better way. There's not. It's what way is most comfortable for you, and then get good at doing that.
Yeah.
And don't let the putter interfere with what you're doing.
Have a putter that connects with doing that.
Yeah. Don't let the putter convince you that your technique doesn't work. How's that for a way to put it?
There you go.
That I got fit for this putter and it's not working for me. Well, I can't tell you, Tony, and I'm not going to go long, but I can't tell you the number of successful lessons I've had that because I look at what the player does and how the putter fits, that the player comes to me and says, Bruce, I'm not putting well, and I don't know why. And it's because his body motion didn't match what the putter was built to do. And when I tell them, well, typically people that use this type of putter swing the putter like this, all of a sudden it's better for them. Oh, geez, this feels a lot better. And they didn't really have a method of their own. They were trying a different method every day. So I just gave them method number 197, and they stuck with it for a few days.
Yeah.
I said, I can do this. I can swing my right arm without using my shoulders. Oh, good. Just let it swing inside, take it down the line. It'll be great. One-handed stroke, right? Yeah. And they go, hey, that works. Yeah, it'll work. It'll work. Now, are you going to get good at it, or we're going to go back tomorrow when you miss a 4-footer?
Try something again, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then, that's where I step in because I get to listen to it and say, well, let's try what we were trying there. Go back to it. So it's fun. Human nature is we're never going to be perfect as fitters and teachers, and the beauty of it is because of human nature that we'll never convince somebody to just keep doing the same thing no matter what the results are. You'll eventually figure it out.
Yeah.
So, thank God. That way we all got jobs.
There you go. Bruce, this was really beyond what I expected today. You're getting into some things that, really need to be talked about.
I think a bunch of us have talked for years about changing the conversation about putting.
Yeah.
We'd accomplished it with full swing, and now it's time to change it with putting. I've been more in the background. I'm presenting to guys that are presenting. I'm not presenting too much to the public. Eventually, maybe I'll get to that point where the part of my online program is going to be basically like a college-based course.
Yeah.
Where you can sign up for a series of lessons. Then you don't have to travel. You don't have to pay the extra money, you can just come and do the online stuff with interaction from me. That's my goal with this. And then the thing to remember is if you come to me, everything's going to apply to what you do. It's not going to tell you to do something different. It's just going to apply to what you do. And you can take it, leave it, pick the parts you like. That's what I love about it. You talking to guys, Bruce, this is what I'm doing. Hey, great. I think it's great.
Yeah.
Just do that. Share that with people. That's enough. It doesn't have to be all of it. It doesn't have to be as deep. You don't have to be as sick about it as I am. You can just do what you feel like you do best. Right?
You love diving into it.
Oh yeah. I want to understand it. I don't want to just take it for granted. I don't want somebody else to tell me how it worked. I want to understand it, and I'm getting closer. I got a late start, but I'm getting closer. I can see things that other people don't see. So
yeah. Well, that's great, Bruce. Again, thanks for today. I put links about. Yeah, it was fabulous, and we weren't able to do it last week because you had some fun stuff related to your golf course that everybody's struggling with, what to do about getting to play or not play, and the drivers from, on high, right?
Right.
And you found some good ways to get things so people can play golf where you are, and that's neat.
And just, we've got the best part, Tony, is I think, you and I mentioned beforehand was that I'm seeing guys with 3 clubs. I'm seeing, we don't have any flags in. We don't have any rakes. We took away as many places that we could, commonality between another player that someone might touch. And so it's just basically you and your golf ball. We don't let the ball go in the cup. We didn't put any flags in. So I'm jokingly, and Scott, I'll have to forgive me, but we've set our golf course up in the decade style. So now you can't go pin seeking because there's no pin to go seek. You just got to pick the right spot, hit it to the right spot, and then figure it out from there. So,
well, he wants you to hit it to the middle of the green a lot of times anyhow. So
hopefully you'll forgive me on that. But it's what he's been trying to tell people to do for a while now, and we're forcing it down their throat. But it's working, and playing golf in that manner is as safe as going to the grocery store or anything else. Probably safer. So we're glad to have people out. We're glad to see them. We think with a little warmer weather, some guys that haven't walked in years will walk, and there's going to be some little good out of it, I think.
Yeah.
Certainly not in the scheme of things, but in our little world, there'll be some good.
Well, take care again, and thanks for this.
Yeah,
and hang in a minute. I just want to mention one thing after we're done, okay?
The Golf Improvement Podcast is sponsored by Tony Wright and Game Improvement Golf. Tony creates exceptional golf clubs. You shoot lower scores.
Thank you, Bruce, for sharing some valuable information today. You can find more information about Bruce Rearick and Burnt Edges Consulting on his blog page. I've included a link to it in the show notes. My shout out today is pretty much the shout out from my last interview because it's so important, and that is to all of us in the United States who are sacrificing in any way to ensuring that the effects of the coronavirus are as minimal as possible. Stay safe, stay home, stay away from other people for right now. It's important, it matters for everyone. Well, that's it for today. My next interview is one of those milestone ones, episode 150. And I really wanted to do this one with my good friend and mentor, Bert Reich from Gooder Custom Clubs in Saskatchewan, Canada. We're going to go deep into what great true custom club fitting is and how it can benefit golfers. I can't wait. See you in 2 to 3 weeks. Stay safe.
Game Improvement Golf, your source of information and inspiration to become an exceptional golfer now. www.gameimprovementgolf.com